Alright, welcome back my friends to All Cars. It is time for another Motorweek retro review reaction video, and this week it is the '84 Pontiac Fiero. So I don't know when I'm going to upload this exactly, but I have been working on my history of the Fiero video, so I thought this was appropriate to jump in and take a look at. I love this car. I'm interested to hear what Motorweek said about it when it was brand new. This slow, heavy, ponderous vehicle that ended up being a cult classic. So hey, you know what, it's just you and me. We're sitting around by the fire. Grab your favorite beverage, let's have a conversation and a trip down memory lane and see what Motorweek says about the Fiero in 1984.
Motorweek is made possible by Rock Auto, Tire Rack, and Die Hard.
You know, it's not easy to be different in a large corporation like General Motors. As proof, take our four-wheeled friend here, the Pontiac Fiero 2M4. It was over 5 years before the Fiero reached production, nearly twice as long as usual for a new design. Part of that reason, Pontiac had to sell the Fiero to GM Brass, not as a sports car, but as a very small, you see it's less than 13.5 feet long, two-seat commuter car that just happens to be fun to drive. But during the course of development, something strange happened. The energy crisis was officially forgotten. So while the base version still fits that high mileage image, make no mistake about it, this is a sports car. And the full sporty pretensions of the design can now be openly explored, which is just what we're going to do.
Great intro, because that's exactly correct. When they came up with this, originally it was conceived as a sports car, but they knew they could never sell that. And with the energy crises of the 70s, they presented it as a small commuter car that would get up to 50 miles per gallon. What's very fascinating to me is this almost perfectly parallels the development of the MR2, where in the 70s, Toyota created a program to develop a small car that was highly fuel efficient but fun to drive, and it morphed into the MR2. The difference between the two the two cars is that Toyota put their emphasis behind it, their resources. The Fiero was given a tiny budget and, well, told to make do. They still made major advancements in manufacturing, the plastic body panels and everything else, but underneath, it was same old GM. This is a fascinating history. Let's take a look at what they say about how it drives.
First, the translation. In Italian-American, Fiero 2M4 means a very proud, two-body, mid-mounted engine, four-cylinder sweetheart. And how sweet it is when it comes to handling. The near-perfect placement of the engine is just behind the driver, but just ahead of the rear wheels. That makes the Fiero feel like it's on rails as it twists around a fast bend. The stiffer springs and shocks of the handling package and sticky 14-inch Eagle GT tires are standard on this up-level SE model, so wet-dry adhesion is excellent and spins almost impossible. The Fiero is relatively heavy, 2,590 pounds, and its engine output is only 92 horsepower and 134 pounds of torque. Even with those figures, its average speed through our tight slalom was 45 miles an hour. Most impressive. The F in Fiero must stand for flat, since body roll is almost unnoticed by either the driver or the eye. While moderate understeer is present, the back end has no nervous traits. The only drawback to all this fun is the very slow steering. The rack and pinion system has no power assist. It takes a lot of steering wheel work to maneuver a narrow course.
So that was pretty impressive. Very flat through all of that. And the steering came up over and over again in my research. The it's rack and pinion, but it's not power assist. Apparently GM towards the end, I don't know, 86, 87, 88, something like that, was testing power steering, but they thought it was too noisy, so they never offered it. So the Fiero never had power steering through its entire life, as far as I know. And unfortunately, it doesn't have a lot of power, but it handled really, really well in spite of its limitations. And it was a little porky, let's face it. It was a little heavy for what it was.
The Fiero comes with only a 4-speed manual or 3-speed automatic. There aren't enough gears to match the engine's modest output when you get into trouble, like trying to power out of a high-speed skid. So the Fiero is best driven by careful use of the 4-wheel disc brakes and a heavy throttle. But then, isn't that how you always drove a real sports car? Aside from that, Motorweek found the available power quite adequate. Acceleration times were above average for modern cars. 0 to 60 came in at 11.2 seconds. You do run through first gear rapidly, but a time of 9.1 seconds over a 500-foot on-ramp course certainly qualifies as quick. It's no slouch in the 40 to 55 mile per hour passing time either, 4.5 seconds. Smooth starts are hard to come by since you have to master the slap-engaging clutch. But once rolling, we again awarded a good show for a 17.6 second, 74 mile per hour quarter mile. Even better straight-line performance will come when a V6 is added next year, and we'll add another accolade for Fiero brakes. While a bit touchy with a tendency for the rear wheels to lock up first, all in all, they're very secure. Fade is modest and stops were straight, with a very short average of 125 feet from 55 miles per hour.
So let's talk about the brakes real quick. So again, I've said many times, I think that 115 is kind of the magic number for this stopping performance. That's a little long, not much. It's good. It's very, very good. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of drama. Right? Lockup, smoke, everything else. And that was one of the problems with the Fiero that they had to address later on. Although it had 4-wheel disc brakes, they weren't well balanced. And they were cobbled together from other cars. So it stopped, but it wasn't the best performance.
The pedal was firm and made it easy for the driver to know just how hard to push for any given situation. We'd expect only 2 complaints from everyday drivers. First, the very heavy, low-speed steering effort, and second, the extremely wide 40-foot turning diameter. All potential owners of slight build might wish to put in a few Charles Atlas sessions first. And for that matter, the Fiero's Porsche look-alike emblem does imply that the first year's 85,000 units aren't for everyone. But if you do apply, you'll not only get a slick car to drive, but one that's slick-looking too. The all-plastic body panels were smooth with excellent fit and finish. To protect against minor dings, the front fenders are flexible and have the same type paint as the harder panels. This reduces the problem of irregular fading found on cars using pliable plastic in the past. Almost everything on the Fiero has been given careful attention and compromises kept to a minimum. The interior is first-rate. It feels much roomier than most sports cars, including the much larger Corvette. Seats are very comfy, with stereo speakers located in each headrest. Instrumentation is nearly complete and highly legible. Everything is electronic, including the speedometer. And in the small favors department, they give you a dial rather than the ubiquitous digital face. Thank you, Pontiac.
So interior-wise, they're being very complimentary here of what this interior is actually doing and the displays it gives you. What they're not really criticizing is the quality of the interior. Very, very generic 83, 84 General Motors. This is a interior that probably does what it's supposed to, but it's not terribly attractive and it's not very high quality materials. but it does what it's supposed to do, and Motorweek likes it.
And thanks for making the left-hand parking brake lever always rest in a down position. At least crawling into the low cockpit is no more difficult than it has to be. Another kudo for placing the gear shift lever high on the console so your arm can easily pivot to and from the wheel. Now, if they can only do something about the long, stiff shift linkage, always a problem in mid-engine cars. Pontiac had also better instruct their dealers on how to show the best use of the Fiero's small but deceptively good cargo space. The deep cavity behind the engine takes one hard-sided three-suiter, or a few soft bags. In fact, Pontiac will offer a special set of Fiero luggage as an option.
And that's really important right here, because if you think about this is a car you're commuting with, or it's your second car and you want to take it up to the mountains for the weekend, for example, you throw some bags in the back. You're not picking up all the groceries, right? I don't see this car as somebody buying it for their everyday use, right? I see this as it's a second car. It's a fun piece. This is adequate, not exceptional, adequate luggage space. And you're going up to the mountains for a weekend, you throw a couple things in the back, and away you go. This works as long as you're careful about it.
And duffers will be glad to know that the main design criteria for the Fiero's short if wide bay was accommodation of 2 standard golf bags. After a day on the greens, you can change into your dress blazer, kept in a garment bag behind the seats. Now, if they'd only included something to hang it on. You might be able to squeeze it under the front bay, along with the radiator, spare tire, and braking components. The engine and transaxle, the 2.5-liter Iron Duke unit, is housed transversely directly behind the cockpit. It looks like a devil to service, but it's actually, again, the most accessible mid-engine installation yet devised. Most major components are reachable from both above and below the car. Such attention to servicing is also noticeable in the front wishbone suspension. The shocks are offset towards the rear rather than inside the coil springs for quick and easy change. While we have approached...
I appreciate them bringing that up. One of the things I heard in the 80s and in the 90s is that, GM cars had problems, but they were easier to service. They knew what they were doing. They made it easier to service. That doesn't get away from the issues they had, but it is an indication that GM knew what they were doing and were trying to do the right thing. And this car was developed on a shoestring budget. Truly, $400 million, $300 million, including getting the factory ready. They did an amazing job to get it to this point. Let's finish up here.
Fiero as a sports car, Pontiac has tried to keep it faithful to the original commuter car image. Mileage ratings are high, 27 city and 48 highway. However, our very young test sample never exceeded 29. With age, we would expect between 35 and 40 in everyday driving. But if the Fiero is so well conceived and executed, it must also cost a bundle, right? Well, like life, it's all relative and depends on what you want. Using loads of off-the-shelf parts, let Pontiac price the base version at $1 under $8,000. The fully decked-out price is under $12,000. So with great handling and adequate power, the beautifully styled Pontiac Fiero 2M4 has got to be the enthusiastic commuter's bargain of the year.
So, interesting, fantastic review. I love the Fiero, I really do. I've always wanted one. I think they look fantastic, and I in my heart, I believe the MR2 is a better car. I believe it's better engineered. I believe it's more reliable. I believe it's better handling. But dollar for dollar, if somebody gave me the money and said, here, go buy an MR2 or a Fiero, I'd buy the Fiero every time, because I just think it captures a moment. I really do. It looks fantastic, and the later years look even better. They added that small V6. It looks even better. The potential of what the Fiero could have become is amazing to me. Pontiac, if they'd been given the resources, could have developed this into a, once the Quad 4 came out, a turbocharged Quad 4, a V6, they can fit an LS into this engine bay. A little bit of luggage, better quality interior, better steering, and all of a sudden you've got a really competitive car that competes with, like, as a minor Lotus. This had so much potential, and GM just squandered it. And I understand why. When they had so much going wrong in the 80s, they had to get the major sellers right. This little side trip over here, they couldn't spend the effort on it. I get that. And with the later, what they don't talk about here, the later issues of reliability and the fires and everything else, they couldn't stand the distractions and the embarrassment that came from the Fiero. But still, what an amazing car that is a great example of what could have been. I love the look of this car, but I will give you this major caveat here. Once you get a couple years into this, right, and you've got the MR2, the CRX, the Prelude, and later you've got the NX2000, the MX3 from Mazda, I don't think I'd get the Fiero. I really don't. I think the other front-wheel drive sportier cars offer more flexibility, more everyday usability versus this. This is really focused, but then doesn't have the performance to quite back it up. It's not a Corvette. It's not a Lotus. It's not a Ferrari. It just has that kind of look without the everyday room for luggage, for I picked up my dry cleaning, whatever it happens to be. And those other cars like the MX3 and the NX2000, they do. They offer that. It's a little sporty. I feel good driving it. It's affordable, and it's got some usability and maybe a trunk too. I love the Fiero. I really do. I'll be honest with you, somewhere in the late 90s, a buddy of mine and I actually talked about putting our money together and buying a used Fiero because we both liked him so much. We never did it. Thankfully, honestly, that would have been a disaster waiting to happen. But I've always been thinking about it. And this is one of those cars that if I had the money and one came available and it was great, I would love to buy one and drive it for a while and just experience it for all of its flaws. To experience it, because it was such a missed opportunity for Pontiac to really leap into the sports car realm beyond the Grand Ams that they were going to offer after this. Thanks for being here, guys.